Hello everyone and welcome back to another exciting, thrilling, action-packed episode of Experience Kills. We might be coming to you through your eyeballs, we might be coming to you just through your ear holes. That's what we do here at Experience Kills. We approach you in every direction like an expert flanking maneuver. And with me today, on my left flank, as always, my number one guy, my partner in crime, it's Richard.
I always come in eye holes.
Lovely. And I am, as always, your host, Ben. And you know what? The flanking maneuver came to mind because we are here to talk about the massive game made by Ubisoft Massive, that is The Division 2. Yeah, this is the big release of the moment, Richard. And for reasons that are only known to Richard, he hasn't jumped on board like I have. So
well,
this is just my gameplay this year.
Some people have got a seemingly infinite amount of money to spend on video games.
Well, I don't believe in going out. So, or doing anything social, or anything at all, really, other than play video games. So
I've bought a car just so I can come and see you.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice though. We'll let that one go then, won't we? That you've not played the Division 2.
No.
And I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about the setup for the Division 2 because, you know, the Division 1 came out a few years ago. It was hugely popular, massive amounts of hype and anticipation, and, you know, it wasn't so far long ago that you've forgotten what that is. The concept is, you know, very simple. The Division, as a group, as an agent, you are sort of like covert good guys that are within United States populace, and you are activated in the events when things go really, really bad. And they went bad in the Division 1, they got worse in the Division 2. Now we are in Washington, D.C. The capital has fallen. It's 7 months later. The dollar virus has spread. And basically, society has completely collapsed in the United States. And you are doing what you can to help the good people of DC resist the sort of awful totalitarian brutality brought upon you by various kind of rogue paramilitary elements, criminal gangs, and things of that nature. And you're going to do that the only way you know how. That's by shooting people in the face. So
Ben, when are we going to talk about the video game version of Washington DC?
Don't get too political though, Richard. People will complain. Oh, yeah. Because, you know, one of the things Ubisoft has said many times in the run-up to this coming out, it's not political. We believe the Division 2 is not a political game. It's not about politics. And I think what they're trying to say by that is because obviously there's huge amounts of like political commentary just in the setting and the idea of the Division 2. What they're saying is they're not taking a stance, which is kind of one of the big problems with Ubisoft games, isn't it? Because they like these sort of controversial, thought-provoking political setups. Look at Far Cry 5, for example. And then they don't really delve into it.
No, they like it,
strange.
but not enough to lose any customers over it.
Yeah, and to be honest, they kind of pull it off. I personally would, you know, I would love a proper political, engaging kind of storyline. For example, of the nature of one of my all-time favourite games, which is Spec Ops: The Line, which really goes into the politics of war and is incredibly brave in that area. And just a shout out to the lead writer on that one, Walt Williams. He's got an amazing book, actually, I've been reading recently on video game writing and his time in the industry. I highly recommend it if you're interested in that sort of thing. But anyway, I digress. But, you know, somehow Ubisoft does pull off these settings, even though they don't go into it. And I think that's, you know, it is impeccably well done in the Division 2. One of the greatest assets of the Division 2, because it's, I don't know if you've seen any video of it, Richard. I'm assuming you've caught some of the marketing. It's incredibly high. You know, the fidelity on display here is just stunning.
I've played the beta.
Oh, you played the beta. Oh, so you kind of okay, good. But I mean, it blows me away, the environmental storytelling, because every room you go into, every alley you walk down, every open space you cross is filled with just the crap left over from, you know, 7 months of societal collapse, and it tells stories. You can piece together what's happened in these locations from other, you know, survivors or bad guys, and that's just from the environment. And then of course you've got the audio logs, the echoes that you pick up like in the Division 1, which all add to this incredible sort of cohesive world that feels believable. It feels like, you know, it could happen tomorrow. And at the same time, of course, gives you this amazing power fantasy of being this badass Tom Clancy inspired, super agent with, a raft of guns and, thousands of loot items to choose from. And I think, do you know what? I think as the resident Anthem expert, Richard, we need to talk a little bit about how this particular loot shooter does it all right with loot, where Anthem, especially as you get later on, maybe doesn't do it quite as well. The Division is all about choice. It gives you a crap ton of stuff. It's giving you gear all the time in every variety, and you basically are then able to just make your perfect build, to min-max exactly how you want to, rather than, say, holding back the good gear to sort of give a full sense of rarity to it, which is kind of what I feel like Anthem does. Does that sound fair?
I guess. I mean, it's difficult in Anthem because I am really enjoying it, but when you look under the hood, there are some problems there, I guess. But yeah, I'm forgiving it so far.
And look, and to Anthem's credit, this is an interesting comparison, is that while I was playing Division, I was like, well, this is definitely technically far more competent. However, it's far less ambitious. It's not trying to create a brand new world. It's not trying to create a fantastical environment which we've never seen and have no kind of connection to, and then build on those connections, which is what Anthem's doing. It's trying to create a very realistic representation of Washington DC, which it does very well.
You could say that's more ambitious though, right? I mean, you've already spoken about how there's a lot of storytelling in the environments.
Yeah.
I have to say, it's not my experience. You've obviously played it a lot more than I have, but I played a fair amount of the original game. I've played the beta of this, and my sense was that because Ubisoft try to distance themselves from political content and try and make it as palatable as possible, a lot of this stuff feels strangely sterile, even though the environments graphically don't look like clean, and they're shells of cities essentially, aren't they? They're destroyed places, strewn with detritus and the remnants of battles taken place. But it never feels properly lived in to me, at least what I've experienced so far. Yeah, you go.
Yeah, I think actually what that's really interesting there is I would 100% agree with that about the Division 1. I think 2 makes some massive changes to that. Gone are, friendly army guys. There's no JTF helping you. I say helping you, like they were in the Division 1. Now it's survivors. Now it's the regular people of the city who have had to take up arms to protect themselves. And they actively join you in combat, especially in single player, and they will act and really help you in those situations. They are a great distraction. They actually kill enemies. They're not just set dressing. And what you've got now in this are these sort of civilian encampments, which a lot of the story and the focus of the Division 2 is about helping, and is about supporting, and about helping to grow them and reclaim the city. So what it's actually doing is introduced a whole raft of much more believable people, because in the first Division, the story concept is there's this virus, there's this flu, and they evacuate the city. So the only people left are like people that want to take over, want to be assholes, so you can just kill everyone. In this one, that's not what's happened in DC. It is later. Society has collapsed. There was no evacuation, or where it did try to do it, it failed. So you actually have a lot more civilians, which makes the city feel far more lived in, far more like a real place. And another thing is there are bodies. You come across a lot more of just where people have died in rooms and stuff, and you feel like, these person in his apartment is, somebody's come in through the door, they've broken their way and they've killed the person and just left the body there. And this could be someone that tried to survive a bit longer into this intervening 7 months, didn't quite make it all the way. And I think Ubisoft here has got braver with the way it's telling the stories, because it feels like far more human and far more relatable. You're connecting with the people of Washington in a way you never did in the people of New York in Division 1.
If that's true, that's a real achievement, isn't it? Because it's a big scale that they're playing out this experience in now. I suppose what I'm looking for is something like The Last of Us, where you're looking through these destroyed cities, pouring through desks and drawers, and trying to work out what's happened before you got there, and you can work it out from how everything's laid out and everything feels lived. But yeah, if they've got that in a full city, then that sounds impressive.
It truly is, the scale, and so many of the buildings you can go in, so many of the rooms you can investigate. There's loot everywhere, not just guns and stuff, but you're finding resources that you then, like food and water and mechanical parts, which you can then take to these settlements. You often will find AI civilians like roaming either on patrol or out on scavenging missions or trying to repair something out in the city, and you can actually go up to them and assist them, giving them materials, finding them things to help them just do their little mission. You get a little bit of a bonus in XP for that, but it's really just a way of connecting you to the people that you're there to protect, because that's what it's all about. You get a message right at the start of the game: DC is fallen, it's under attack, get to Washington, get to the White House. And it's so badass. Your base of operations is the flipping White House. It's just super cool that you're working from there to take back this city. I've been loving it. I mean, let's talk about time. I put about 20-25 hours into it now. And I feel like I'm only just scratching the surface. I'm only like level 12. I'm taking my time though. I'm not trying to min-max. I'm not trying to rush through it. I'm really exploring the environments, doing all the side missions, because they all add this little bit of flavour. Do you know what I just did in the side mission, Richard?
What?
I went to the Hall of Records to save the Declaration of Independence. It was brilliant. And just not because it really matters now or they need it. It was just because, you know what, that would be a really nice symbol of hope that will bring up the morale of the survivors, that we are trying to bring us back from the brink.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
so what'd you do with it when you got it?
Do you know what, they hang up on their wall?
I was gonna say, oh fuck, that's so cheap.
I mean, it's cheesy as all hell. It's cheesy as all hell, but it's fantastic. I mean, there's been a few things I've been really impressed with in Division 2. One, the environmental storytelling, definitely. The visuals of this game on the Xbox One X are incredible. It's some of the best 4K or close to 4K graphics with HDR kind of enabled stuff I've ever seen. The game looks stunning at all times. But beyond that kind of graphical prowess, gameplay-wise, level design is absolutely fantastic. They have created, what could just be a cover-based corridor shooter experience, and they have set these missions in these iconic places around Washington that are absolutely amazing. Do you know what some of the best places are, Richard? Fighting your way through the various museums that are in Washington. Absolutely, like the National Air and Space Museum is incredible as a place for a firefight. So cool.
I'd like to play this and just see some of the places I remember from Washington, because it's a great city. I wonder how
I've never been. I want to go now.
Yeah.
Really badly. I really want to see it. I mean, obviously it's super iconic. I've seen it on in cinema and on TV many, many, many times. But obviously when I've been to New York and stuff, so that was impressive with the first game. But I really want to go to see Washington not destroyed yet.
Yeah.
So it's just incredible.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about you've talked a bit about how the world feels natural, lived in, and there's sort of emergent behaviour from the occupants of the city. How much of it is a crafted experience, particularly from the point of view of a single player? Because I tend to play alone a lot of the time. Yes,
so let's talk about the difference in this game between single and multiplayer, because it's pronounced. I have played, I'd say, 70% single player and 30% multiplayer. I love this game as a single player experience. It feels like a survival game because it's flipping challenging. In the first game, especially before the patches and the updates, that game was very easy in single player. You could basically, once you had an idea of how to use skills, and there were some skills you could definitely abuse to your advantage, you could really roll through enemies very, very easily in the campaign. The campaign was actually quite short. This game, however, they are much, much, much more challenging encounters, which means you have to really think about where you position yourself, your skill use, making sure you stay in cover like all the time. Crossing between cover is a tactical choice because you're going to have to pick the right moment. Enemies are smart. They will actively flank you. They will advance upon your position. They will send in like shotgun guys and melee units to get up in your face and distract you, as dudes with rifles and SMGs will come around your flanks and try and take you out. So in single player, it's very, very challenging. And what it means is even just getting around the open world, you're always on guard. You're always thinking about, oh, there's an enemy. They pop up on your radar and you're like, oh, they're down there. Do I want to risk this encounter as I head to my next mission? I could die and then have to respawn all the way back, or I might just have to use a health kit that I'll have to wait until I can replenish when I next get back to a safe location. So it's like but then, you know, the cost benefit is, well, I could engage these enemies, or there's a high named, you know, a major character there, a yellow health bar enemy, taking him down could give me some really good loot. However, that engagement could really hurt me or kill me. So is it worth? Is it worth the risk? Especially as those enemies don't always spawn, so you're not always going to be able to find them in the same place, etc. So it's very challenging, and I really like that about this game, because it's realistic and it just leans towards this realistic environment that they've put the game in. They've really made the open world quite difficult by yourself, and I want to stress, by yourself. So when I've done multiplayer, I've never done it just free roam, but I did a couple of the story missions and the side missions with a team of 3 guys, all of the same level. This then becomes like I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show SEAL Team, or you've seen like Act of Valor or something like that about special forces.
No, so, I've seen those.
Okay, fair enough. But picture this: you go from being a dude outnumbered, getting flanked, fighting to survive, to a squad of 4 badass super soldiers clearing rooms and kicking in doors and feeling like nothing can touch you. Though it is at times an unwanted sense of, or an unwarranted sense I should say, of power, because you can still go down very easily, but all of a sudden you're the ones with the power. You're the ones on the front foot, pushing through, and rather than sitting back and trying to pick people off, you know, you're charging in, clearing rooms and dropping guys, because you're sustained fire, because the enemies are just as, in many ways, just as weak as you are. It's not like they have inflated health. It's just much more difficult when you're so outnumbered. But when you're a squad of 4, things change, and it feels great. It feels like there's 2 different gameplay experiences that work completely perfectly together. They don't feel opposed to each other. It makes sense that if you went in a squad of 4, you know, you guys have all these powers, you're tactically knowledgeable, you've got all these great guns. Yeah, you're gonna have that advantage because, you know, you can work together. Whereas by yourself, it's very much slower paced and survival based. Yeah, so I really like that.
Cool. I wish I had it now. You've made me want it, and I can't.
I always do that to you. Sorry.
What have you done? I'm gonna have to find a way to play it.
It's so good, and I'd love to play with you in multiplayer, mate. It's so much fun. I mean, you know, Dark Zone has been tweaked as well. It's less of a PvP and more of a PvE experience now, because there's a dedicated PvP experience that comes on later in the end game and stuff like that. I haven't got to end game. I can't comment on that. I've heard it's very good. It introduces an entire new faction of enemy. They're going to be bringing a 8-player raids into the game shortly as well, which are meant to be incredibly challenging and even more difficult. Yeah, you know, being a loot shooter, they're actively supporting it, fixing bugs, but it's actually it's been one of the smoothest launches I've seen of a game like this, actually, with very little technical problem or server issues or anything like that. I've never had any issues. They seem to be updating it like every other day. They have it down for a couple of hours for maintenance, and they're just pushing out patches and hotfixes all the time. So I think Ubisoft are really, and their plan is to really support it going forwards. You know, they're going to be offering all of this DLC for free, which is great. You know, the season pass gets you things like early access to it, but almost everything that's coming out will be completely for free, which I think is the way to do it. I mean, that's what Anthem's doing as well, to their credit.
Yeah. I didn't realise that. That's a good move. So I could go and buy the base game and not really miss out.
No, exactly. I mean, this is the way these shooters are going. You know, they're being smart about this, where it's like they want to retain their player base. They don't want to split it up. They don't want to drive people away. So they're going to keep this content coming in. I know I've had a great time with it. I guess my only criticism really of this game is that I think the first game had a better sort of central narrative. That drove you through it. I haven't really encountered that yet. It might still come up. I mean, the first game was obviously, you know, you had Rogue Division Agent, you had the dollar bill virus, you had, you know, investigating those things. Whereas in this game, it's much more about just you're helping people to survive. So your missions are kind of usually focused around getting resources or opening up another area for potential survivors and things of that nature. I haven't had any continued story push forward for anything to do with the dollar bill stuff. Or I think it was Aaron Keener was the rogue agent guy from the First Division. He hasn't shown up, though. The only time I've seen his name mentioned is in the tooltip that comes up on the loading screen. So I feel like they've tried to make perhaps a bit of a clean break with this, that it stands on its own, which is fair enough. But yeah, I'm just not finding much in the way of really good story, which is weird because the environmental storytelling, the mission design, the character interactions, they're all very, very good. But they're not really servicing a larger narrative.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is a bit, and it still might pop up. I'm still, for all intents and purposes, early game. I've still got a whole load of story missions to do and side missions and all kinds of things. Because the storytelling within the missions is very good, like I've said, but it just doesn't kind of offer anything else larger than that. It's weird, but it's strange that they've decided to sort of put that on the back burner. But yeah. I guess if you're trying to create a living world shooter, the story isn't really the important part of it, is it? It's the world that matters.
Tell BioWare that. It works.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, look, I respect the fact, and I think a lot of comparisons are being drawn between the two at the moment because they've come out very close together, and I very much respect the fact that BioWare went a different path on this. They don't all have to follow the same formula, obviously. The biggest problem for BioWare is that at its core it has a lot of technical issues in Anthem. Whereas Division 2 has launched here very, very smoothly, but of course they had a whole game to build upon. And if you remember, the First Division had loads of problems.
Yeah, it almost reinvented itself, didn't it, over that first year, 18 months.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, so many of the quality of life improvements from the Division 1 are what has made the Division 2 feel so good from the outset. Like things like the difficulty being higher, the gameplay being tighter, the way the loot is so common and easy to get hold of, the improvements with the ally AI. So much of that is in response to Division 1. And one of the things I'm so happy to see, actually, is that all of that patching and improvements that happened with the Division 1 have been carried over into 2. It's not like one of the things we saw with Destiny 1 and 2 was that Destiny 1 ended up in a really good spot. But when Destiny 2 came out, it's kind of like they forgot a lot of the things that they developed, if you remember rightly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was super frustrating, I thought, for a hardcore player. But what we've got here is Ubisoft building games as a service, building games with long tails that they know they want to retain the players on. And that's what this game is. And it's a technical achievement, it's a gameplay achievement. It's just a shame I can't. The other point of that triangle would be the story, and it's a shame that lets it down just a little bit. But I think there's still goddamn hundreds of hours of fun in this game to be had, and I'm going to keep playing it. I know that. I'm going to be hooked for a while. So yeah, you need to get it, Rich.
I will get it at some point. Final question though, and
Go on.
the most important question.
Yes.
Everyone wanted the Division because you can slide along cars and close their doors as you slide. Can you still do that?
I believe that was put in. Yes, that was they made sure that was in there for this one. Yeah.
Yes.
The only problem is you can't pet the dogs you find in the open world.
Oh.
They need to put a button in to do that. Otherwise, you're going to end up doing what I do, which is usually shoot them in the head.
Don't do that.
Well, I feel like, what's this as a life for a feral dog? The only weird thing is when you shoot animals and stuff, you can't loot them, which is strange to me.
Is it?
You should be able to skin them for some meat or something.
What? Well, you've got dogs carrying cash in Cambridge, have you?
That you think you'd loot that dog for an MP5, mate? Quality. That's what you want. No, so I think that brings us to the end of this episode on the Division 2. I'm having a great time with it. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's how to do a loot shooter right from the outset. But the thing is, you've got to remember, you look at this and you go, right, yeah, 3,000 people worked on that game. You can see that.
Yeah.
You can. It oozes the size of its team. It really does. The art assets, the fidelity of every moment of that experience. Little details, man. Honestly, you can watch the belt of an MG feed through the gun and watch it as it finishes, and the end clip of the belt comes up and flicks across the barrel before you have to then reload. Huh. There's an AR which has a see-through clip. You can watch the bullets go from the clip.
Sweet.
It is incredible levels of accuracy and fidelity, and the representation of Washington. I've never been there, but I can only imagine how good it is. It looks incredible. And the one thing I should mention, obviously, is that it's pretty obvious, but it's so much more varied than New York. Like, the locations and the environments you can go into, so many more places to have gunfights where you shoot people in the face.
I think it's fair to say I'll be on that sooner rather than later if I can afford it. In the meantime, I'll be sliding alongside my new car and pretending that I'm in the Division.
I love it, mate. I love it. So that's the end of another episode of Experience Kills. I hope you enjoyed that one. It was a long one, but I think it's warranted for a big release like that. Please follow us on Twitter at Experience Kills, and if you want to leave us any feedback on there, it's always appreciated. Or just say hi. That's cool too. By all means, leave a comment on this YouTube video, like and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, why don't you go and get the audio-only version as well? That's available on Spotify. That's available on Apple Podcasts. That's available on its raw RSS feed if you hate all of those other providers. You can also follow me at DIYE. And Richard, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Colonel Red.
We'll be back soon, yeah, Rich? More games?
Yeah, when I can afford some. Anyone that wants to send me free games, feel free.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I like it. You know, he's not too big to beg. No. You know, he can do that. No, just putting it out there.
I don't normally ask, do I? But it's out of necessity. I'm so poor now.
You just bought a car. You're not that poor.
Exactly.
Okay.
So poor.
We'll be back soon. So bye-bye.
Bye.
Agent.